How can we change or alter the system? How can we democratize our governance? And how can we actually make global governance work? Well, I think I would start on that, because if we will talk of the global governance, a decade ago, our co-founder, Walden Bello, presented a thesis on deglobalization. And it's quite a powerful and inspiring idea that in order to correct the system, we need two things to work in tandem. And one is deconstruction and reconstruction. And at least for most of us who's been doing organizing, popular education, and networking, we're quite good at the deconstruction. Looking at the process, looking at the actors, looking at who's winning and who's losing in certain arrangements. And for that, we have done that in many campaigns. We have done that on our work on trade and investment, looking at the global trade and investment regime, looking at what's wrong in it, and looking how the arrangements like the World Trade Organization is deindustrializing developing countries, and how the North have perfected a way of getting themselves to be perpetually in power. And we have seen that, for example, in the 2 years ago when there was an attempt to put the UNCTAD in charge of looking at alternatives to the financial crisis, and the World Bank led the effort to not to have that process and question the capacity of the UNCTAD if it has the capacity to do so. So what we are saying is that most of these institutions are saying that we are reforming, we are making our governance better, and thanks to the participation of networks that are putting beautiful words in the policy, but if we will look at the operations, they're still the same. There's good in attending consultations, changing policy, and putting our beautiful language in the policy, but we always emphasize working with the movement and doing also two things in tandem, which is participating in the inside, but mobilizing from the outside. Because first and foremost, every law, every good policy that are put in place, we first fought them on the street. We first discuss them on the street before they ever get into the table and be adopted as a law. So in terms of, before I go to another topic, in terms of trade and investment regime as well, this year, the WTO is having a ministerial in Bali. And for us, we're planning to mobilize. It's also the 10th year anniversary of the death of the South Korean farmer who committed suicide in Cancun as a symbolic act to show that farmers are getting killed everywhere in massive numbers because they're losing their control over their agriculture, over their livelihood. And we're seeing that if we would look at how the World Trade Organization and how free trade agreements have managed to put in place measures that are more radical than the ones being discussed in the WTO, we're seeing that there's more and more problems. So how can we make the WTO really lose its power? We thought we have derailed it in Cancun. We thought that it will never gonna go back, but it's like a zombie. It keeps on coming back and you know, reminding us that it still exists. And in fact, least developing one of the countries under the LDC status, Laos, also joined it recently last year. And in relation to that, if we would look at the new FTAs, the investment clause is it's really giving power to more to transnational corporations. So one of the things that we're doing is helping set up a global campaign to end the impunity of TNCs. And then we're thinking together with many movements to build a process where we can discuss about people's treaty on transnationals. How can we lessen their powers and lessen their powers with a legal legislative process with a, how do you call that, have like the same UN human rights applied to the laws that will govern corporations. On the ground, we're also doing what you're doing. We're doing the naming and shaming, because as I mentioned in the last session, those that are destroying the earth, those that are dehumanizing people and commodifying our nature and the services of nature have names and addresses. And they're the ones that are making huge profit out of the services of nature. And they're even putting this as the new development model. So the green economy, so now I'm going into the climate and environmental security campaign, they're saying that the new development model, this green economy, is superior than the growth model, because it's looking at the fact that we don't just look at the growth figure. There's more into development. But if you would scrutinize it, it's still on that belief that we can grow indefinitely, that the planet don't have a limit. Which is wrong. And that it's not business as usual also. It is beyond business as usual. Because what it is doing is it's reconfiguring capitalism. It is putting a price on the services of nature, for the trees to grow, for the air to circulate, for the river to flow. And putting a price on that, which is ethically, morally, and economically wrong. Because ethically and morally, you could not put a price on the services which is freely given by nature. Economically, it's also wrong just to look at the forest as carbon sink, which the price of, or the computation of it is only based on the amount of carbon, that it can hold. And politically, or maybe morally, sorry, not politically, I mentioned in the last session as well that what is wrong, completely wrong with the way we understand development is that our concept is how to master nature, how to discipline nature and put humans on top of nature. When in fact, there is a law of nature, which we don't understand at all. There's a process and law of the ecosystem. At the same time that humans have law and then nature. So the idea is, how can we live in a way that we recognize that nature have a process and have a law as well as human laws. So in some countries, they're talking about the rights of Mother Earth. So the Cochabamba Summit, for example, which is an answer to the Copenhagen, was attended by 30,000 people, and they recognized that the Mother Nature has rights the same as people. And countries like Ecuador already put that in the constitution. So that the nature also have the same rights as humans. Bolivia is also following the process. In Asia, we're trying to figure out how can we put that it will sit well, it will be fit in our own belief system. Because after all, if it doesn't match your belief, it will not take root and grow. In Asia, some of the discussion, for example, in Thailand, is sufficiency economy. It's proposed by the king of Thailand, and we are also, and also part of our deconstruction process is looking at what's wrong with it. Okay, in Buddhist economy or in Buddhist belief, they look at what makes you happy is seeing that everything is already enough, that it's sufficient, to stop desire and not to think of getting more or achieving more, but be contented with what you have, because that's the law that governs the universe as well. In Bhutan, they're talking about gross national happiness, that it's the same as GDP and other way of measuring development. They're also putting into consideration how happy are you. And also looking at the values, like having your family, enjoying friendship, enjoying time with friends and doing other things is as important as, or even more important than being prosperous. In Latin America, they're discussing about buen vivir, which is living well. And it's not just about the material concern, but also looking at the governance, how people can have an active voice and participation, and not just being consulted in a way where a project will be presented to them, because that's also what is wrong with the development model. When a so-called development project will be presented to you, it's already thought up and discussed in the drawing board, and people have no right to say no. So that also includes that people should have a right to say no to what is being presented as development. And in doing that, in the reconstruction part, we are saying that we have to follow nature. Nature is very diverse. It shows us that there's not just one variety of fish and rice and corn and trees and bees and animals, that nature is diverse. So our approach, our alternatives must also be diverse. And it doesn't have to be big. And it doesn't have to be very small as well. So how to see how we can work in a global, regional, and national level, and at the same time looking at the various instruments that we can use to fight the system. What I see as something positive with all the crises that we are facing, financial crisis, food crisis, the climate crisis, is that it puts the question or the discussion of capitalism back. It become fashionable again to talk about what's wrong with capitalism. That for us in Southeast Asia, for 20 years we were taught that capitalism will not work. Look at China, look at Laos, look at Vietnam, look at Cambodia. You know, all these countries that have become socialist or communist, they never achieve anything. But now it's back into the discussion that there's something awfully wrong with capitalism, and that a sustainable nature, a sustainable development doesn't fit with capitalism. And how we can put that in a day-to-day discussion, looking at alternatives and acting on it, because it's not enough that we know the problem. Sometimes knowing the problem a lot can demobilize us. But it's always important to see how we can organize, how we can do our conscientization, popular education work, development, and political education work, and how we can network. And I think my last point is the North-South relations, because what you're having now, all this austerity program, we've suffered that 25 years ago. You know, we were the experiments of the World Bank and IMF in terms of austerity. It was shoved down our throats. I was born in 1968 and I was called a martial law baby, but at the same time I was also a World Bank IMF baby at that time, because that was when everything was privatized for us. And we were, as I became politicized, I started joining organizations when I was 14. I was looking at how welfare system works in Europe. And these are the values, these are the rights that we've been fighting for, and now we are seeing it being eroded. And people must fight back. So maybe in that instance, we can change the relationship as well, because for so long, the view is that people in the developed country is just giving aid, loan, support to us in the South. But maybe now, this time, we can do a return. We can share how we fought, how we struggled. Only I'm sorry that I would leave it a slightly negative thing, because before, the struggle against colonialism, you know you win because you fought back and the colonizers took the ship back. But this time with climate, it's difficult to win because we are facing a time bomb that climate will change. We're facing a 6 degrees centigrade change, and that will change the world as we know it. The planet will exist, there's no question about it. But the big question is, can we exist in that changed planet? So maybe I will leave you with this question, and I'm looking forward to your sharing in your small groups later on. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dorothy.